The desert was quiet that night, except for the hum of wind against the old communication tower. Jacob Turner leaned against the railing, his eyes lost in the endless stretch of stars above. It had been 6 months since he'd been reassigned to Outpost 9, a forgotten research base on Mars's outer rim, and he was starting to think the silence might drive him insane. He'd come to Mars as an engineer, not a dreamer. But ever since the storms had cut off half their sensors, strange readings began showing up on his monitor, faint blips moving where no rover had been deployed. The others dismissed them as static interference. Jacob, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there. That night, while recalibrating the eastern antenna, he saw it. At first, it looked like a moving shadow, small but quick, darting between the reddish rocks. Jacob squinted into the haze. "Hello," he called out, feeling ridiculous. The shape froze, then slowly rose from behind a dune. It wasn't human. Barely 3 feet tall, the creature had skin that shimmered like liquid silver under the Martian moonlight. Its large eyes reflected the tower's faint blue lights. Jacob's first instinct was to reach for his radio, but something in its gaze stopped him. It wasn't fearsome. It was curious. "Hey, it's okay," Jacob said quietly, crouching down. "I won't hurt you." The alien tilted its head, blinking slowly, then made a soft sound, like a mixture of a hum and a chirp. Jacob hesitated, then extended his hand. To his astonishment, the little being stepped closer and touched his palm. Its skin felt warm, pulsing with life. From that night everything changed. The alien returned again and again. Jacob started calling it Liri, after the way it pronounced a certain sound when it was happy. Over time, Liri began mimicking his words. At first, it was just fragments. "Hello, Jacob. Food." But soon, it began stringing phrases together, its melodic voice echoing softly through the outpost corridors. They shared small moments, Jacob teaching Liri how to write in the red dust using a stick, or showing it holograms of Earth's oceans and forests. Liri seemed fascinated by water, something Mars could never offer. One night, while they sat beside the antenna array watching the twin moons drift apart, Liri traced a small circle in the dirt and placed its hand over Jacob's. "Same," it said slowly. "You and me. Same." Jacob smiled. "Not quite the same, Liri. You're special." "Special," Liri repeated, frowning. "Means bad." "No," Jacob said quickly. "Means beautiful. Different but beautiful." Liri tilted its head, seeming to absorb the word. Then, without warning, it leaned forward and pressed its forehead to his. A warmth spread through him, a strange, soothing pulse that wasn't just physical. For the first time in years, Jacob felt something he hadn't known he was missing: connection. Weeks turned into months. The outpost grew colder as Martian winter approached. The rest of the crew had left for a nearby colony, leaving Jacob alone to monitor systems until the next supply run. He didn't mind. He had Liri. They built a shelter near the cliffs, where the sun lingered longer. Jacob brought spare heaters, tools, and food packs. Liri brought glowing stones it found deep in the caverns. Together they made something that resembled a home. Fragile, temporary, but real. One evening, as a storm rolled across the plain, Liri pointed toward the horizon where lightning flashed in violet arcs. "Go," it said softly. "Go where?" Jacob asked. "Home," Liri replied. "Storm big. Bad for you." Jacob chuckled. "I've been through worse." Liri shook its head. "Not storm of sky. Storm of people. They come." Jacob froze. "People." Liri's eyes dimmed. "They find Liri. No more same. Realization hit him like a punch. The sensors, the ones that had picked up movement. Someone else must have noticed. Maybe Earth Command had intercepted his private logs. Maybe they knew. He looked at Liri, small and trembling in the flickering light. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. But when the ships arrived the next day, sleek silver crafts with flashing insignias, Jacob's words turned to dust. The officials called it a containment operation. They claimed Liri's species carried unknown pathogens, that they needed to isolate and study the creature. Jacob tried to explain that Liri wasn't dangerous, that it could communicate, even learn. But they didn't listen. When they surrounded the cliffside shelter, Liri stood calmly beside him. It looked up, eyes reflecting the glint of human armor. "Jacob," it whispered, touching his chest. "No fear." "Liri, don't." Before he could finish, Liri stepped forward, raising both hands. Its body began to shimmer, glowing brighter than before, pure light radiating in waves. The soldiers halted, their scanners going haywire. "Liri, stop. You'll get hurt," Jacob shouted. The alien turned its gaze to him one last time. "Love no size," it said slowly. "No species. Same." Then the light engulfed everything. When Jacob awoke, the soldiers were gone. The crafts had retreated. The cliffs were silent except for the whisper of wind. Liri was nowhere to be seen. Only a small, smooth stone lay where it had stood, glowing faintly blue. He picked it up and felt the familiar warmth. Pulse faint but alive. Months later, when Jacob returned to Earth, he was hailed as a survivor of an unexplained Martian incident. Official reports claimed he'd endured radiation exposure and hallucinations. No one believed his story of a 3-foot being who had taught him words beyond language. But in the quiet of his apartment, Jacob kept the glowing stone on his desk. Sometimes it pulsed softly when he spoke. And on nights when the sky was clear, he'd look up at the stars and whisper, "Same, Liri, same." Because he finally understood. Love didn't come in familiar forms. It didn't depend on shape, color, or species. Simply was. And somewhere out there, on a lonely red planet, a small being of light carried that truth with it, the truth they had discovered together. That love has no size. And it has no species. Jacob sat by his window, Earth's blue light spilling through the glass. The city below pulsed with motion, with life, and yet he'd never felt more distant from it all. On his desk, the small glowing stone pulsed softly, a steady heartbeat against the silence. Every few seconds it flickered like it was breathing. He reached out and touched it, just as he had touched Liri's hand on that first night. The warmth spread through his palm, filling him with that same strange peace. Sometimes if he closed his eyes, he could almost hear Liri's voice, the soft hum that sounded like laughter in the wind. They had called him delusional, said no such being could exist. But deep down Jacob knew the truth. He had seen compassion in a creature that the world called alien. He had seen courage in something barely 3 feet tall. And he had learned that love didn't have to fit inside the narrow borders of human understanding. One night, as he watched the stars through the window, the stone began to glow brighter than ever before. The pulse quickened, 1, 2, 3 beats, and then a faint whisper filled the room. "Same. Jacob, same." Tears welled in his eyes. He smiled through them. "Yeah, Liri," he whispered. "Always the same." Then, as suddenly as it had brightened, the light faded to a soft, steady glow, as if Liri was saying good night from across the cosmos.